Tell us the story of the map, the United States map of 1611.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's one that came from Global Business Network. But there's a map, as you can see here, from the year 1611, and it shows the United States of America. And whenever I use this map in California, it gets a lot of laughs.
It might be the map of the
Yeah,
future if the
is it a
earthquakes
map
keep
of the
working.
past or a map of the future? It's a good question. But as you can see, it shows that California is an island. And the story that goes with this map is that the early Spanish explorers around the Baja Peninsula, Southern California, drew that part of the map. And later Spanish explorers up kind of around Puget Sound, Vancouver, drew that part of the map. And then back in Europe, they just kind of connected the dots, and voila, we have a map of California. And that was just fine until somebody decided to use the map. And so the story goes, it was the missionaries who were going to use the map to bring Christianity to the North America, which was largely unexplored. And so what they did was they packed mules on their boats, and they created boats that could be taken apart. So they sailed up to the edge of California, disassembled the boats, packed them on mules, marched them across the state of California. And their plan was to put them back together when they reached the other side of the island, and then sail the rest of the way in. But as you know, they went up the Sierra Nevadas, down the other side, and pretty soon they were in the desert, and didn't work out quite so well.
Can you imagine?
So yeah, it's a great metaphor though, and I remember Peter Schwartz talking about this, that it took 50 years for that map to get changed.
Wow.
So even when that feedback went back to Europe, said, the map is incorrect, the response was, no, our map is right, you're in the wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many things that can be learned from this map. Number one, most corporate decision makers get to their positions because they have a map of the environment, and they get feedback that it's an accurate map. Otherwise, to get promoted up the chain, to make good decisions, have a track record. So then to ask people that their maps might be inaccurate is a tough challenge for a lot of senior people in organizations. I mean, they've had feedback that they're really good at leading the organization and whatnot. So to question that is sometimes problematic. If you look at the map again, one of the things I like to point out is if you look at around the island of California and even inland on the map, the western edge of the United States, if you look at the detail with which that's drawn, the rugged coastline and these rivers going inland, and no one had ever been there. In fact, there wasn't even water there.
Yeah.
So what's the lesson? I mean, what they did, what the map makers did, was they looked at the east coast of the United States, and they just duplicated that terrain, and they just filled it in, which is what we do, decision makers. We fill in based on what we know.
It worked here.
Exactly.
So it can work over here.
So the other thing is that every one of us has a map in our heads, and it's what we make decisions on. It's built of your experiences, successes, failures, and all of that. And the idea is you adjust your map as you have more experiences. But the problem is that some of these things that organizations are experiencing are so far outside of previous experience. They get blindsided by things they didn't even know they didn't know. It's one of those kinds of things. So it's a big challenge. But the map is really useful in laying out kind of one of the main metaphors of scenario planning. And the last thing I'll say about that is the function of scenarios is to look at this map and say, where are the islands of California for my organization? We think there's an island there. Is there? And how do we know for sure? And I can operate on my map, but what if we put all of our maps together? Does that give us a better map? The idea is better than my own. So trying to build a shared map.
Common ground. I mean, it's so true. I mean, I love this story because and I've been in a few of these corporate initiatives in my past where, the decision makers, executives said, there is an island there. And you're like, listen, there's no island there. But you're right, the further you get up the chain, the less you actually spend, sailing across the ocean and carrying the boat across across the environment. And so you really got to have some type of intelligent network building that allows us to facilitate discussions, to have frameworks to build those discussions, that structured dialogue, and scenario planning I think is also a great way of doing that. We found with operational risk, business continuity management, when we can bring these executives together, and some executives will say, no, that's not a problem, I got that out of control. I've got, I've been making decisions for 30 years, and then you talk to the supply chain person, it's like, listen, if this thing goes down, we're out of business in 6 months. You know? And it's you got to have that dialogue that allows us to put the two together, which is why I like your process. Get some intelligence on it, get the project going, get your research, start that collaboration process. And
yeah, one of the things I really listen for, and especially in the scenario workshops and things, whenever someone says that could never happen, I mean, I hear...
That's a red flag right there? Okay.
I hear warning bells going off, because that's where I go and push on. I go, really, is that true? Because that's somebody saying, here is an island of California, and my job is to say, are you sure about that? And what do other people think about that? And what are the circumstances in which that might be possible?
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's a great. As a matter of fact, you should actually have a place on your wall that says red flags, or that can't happen, or something like that. So you can always keep those up there.
Those are often really important things to explore.